you know, and it's not just a marketing thing, but you hear about marketing leaders going, I'm going to replace my whole team with agents, and that will save me lots of money, and everything I've talked about so far, authenticity, human input, for me counters that argument. But ultimately, you should invest in the two things: invest in the people you've got. It shouldn't be about replacing expertise with AI. You should be looking and go, God, and most teams are probably incredibly stretched already. So you're looking and going, oh God, how can I support them to be more efficient and work more and produce more and better results for our business? That should be the first thought. And then on the other side, then it's investing in the right AI tools to help support that. And again, I emphasize support that, not replace.
B2B Marketers Off the Record, sponsored by Headley Media, for honest, practical conversations about what's really working in B2B marketing.
Welcome back to B2B Marketers Off the Record. I am joined by Niall Sullivan. He is Head of Marketing at Senseye for Siemens. Niall, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, no, thanks, Freya. Thanks for inviting me on. So I'm the Head of Marketing of Senseye at Siemens. So Senseye was a company that was acquired by Siemens June 22. So nearly 4 years, maybe to the day or something like that. So been quite a journey. But I mean, my background, so I've been in B2B software marketing for over 10 years now. I've worked for companies of all different sizes, from 10-person startups, sort of mid-sized companies, Siemens now, big multinationals. So I've sort of seen a lot. I guess where my passion lies, and you'll probably hear about it a lot today, is in the content side of things. At heart, I'm a content marketer. I did journalism when I first, at university, and I've always loved the written word. And in most recent times, I've shifted very much into the podcasting world, and a big believer in that. Every company, let's say every B2B marketer, should be running a podcast. So I'm really pleased you are, Freya, of course, as well.
No, of course. We're so happy to have you on, Niall. I think we originally met at one of the B2B marketing events. I think you were on a panel and I was on a different panel, but we met as kind of co-speakers. And it's a pleasure to have you on and share all the insight from your experience. One of the things that we like to do at the top of the B2B Marketers Off the Record podcast is play on a little bit of nostalgia. So, Niall, tell me you've been in B2B marketing for several years without telling me.
From my perspective, it's quite a funny one, because I think if you've ever worked, luckily working for Siemens, you go to events and everything's all done, laid out for you. But back in the old startup days, pre-acquisition and with other companies where you've had to do the long walk, I'm going to use the NEC as an example, but it could be any big arena where you've done these huge exhibitions, but you've had to walk for miles from the car park, like packed full of stuff, banners and giveaways, and you drop them all over the floor. And it's particularly hard after 3 days of on your feet talking to people at the end. So I think that's one that I think a lot of our fellow B2B marketers would relate to, I think.
Definitely. We've all been there, trying to trek from the car park into wherever. Why do they make it so difficult to enter these arenas and these places where the events are hosted? You've got to carry everything on your back. Or my favourite is one of those little pull-along trundles, loading that up and just hoping it doesn't rain.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, and that's it. I didn't even mention weather conditions, and actually, I never really thought of that. You're right. Something to pull everything along. I didn't figure that, but maybe I needed the exercise or something. Is a good excuse to. But yeah. So mainly those sort of days are behind me at the moment, having to do that. But I think it's like an initiation for any B2B marketer, is that you have to do these shows and have to carry everything and do every little logistic around them. So that'd be the one for me.
Yeah, for sure. And a conference centre looks so different pre-stand build, right? When you walk in and it's empty, huge, and everyone is there in their scruffs trying to build everything and pull everything together. Now, you have been in the industry for some time, and looking at your LinkedIn, it looks like you've got an interesting story to tell us. How did you get into B2B marketing in the first place?
Yeah, well, I hope so, first of all. But if you, so on my LinkedIn profile or the description at the top, I describe myself as an accidental marketer, which sort of describes it quite nicely. But I guess the the story behind it. I mean, I mentioned at the start about doing journalism at university. So first of all, never thought about marketing as a career. Wanted to be a journalist at the time. The journalism industry wasn't, at that time it was sort of paper based. There was very little online media, so it's got a bit of a dying industry. Fortunately, it's picked up thanks to social media and all that kind of thing. But anyway, so one of my first jobs was actually copywriting, like writing websites. I worked for the Yellow Pages or Yell.com, so I used to do a lot of writing for websites and for builders and plumbers and this kind of thing. So what I didn't know at the time is some of these skills maybe overlap with marketing, what I was doing at the time. I then applied for a job at a software company and an ERP software company, and it was basically to be their web admin, it was described as. And I went to the interview, didn't get the job unfortunately, and then thought, well, that's that, then I'll carry on. But then a few months later, I had an email from the CMO there at the time, and he said, well, we didn't offer you that job at the time because actually we wanted someone more technical. It was more of a technical development role, not content role. But our digital marketing executive didn't know what that was at all. But yeah, their digital marketing executive was leaving, and they said, well, we thought your skills overlapped quite nicely. Do you want the job? Basically, no interview or anything. And like I said, never considered it. Didn't really know. There was a bit of a description about what it might entail and what I might lead, but didn't know too much about it. But there was that gut feeling you get where you're like, this actually sounds quite for me kind of thing, like marketing. Yeah, I guess it does fit. And then the journey began. And yeah, like I said, worked with various different size companies on teams, and eventually, lucky enough to sort of be in more senior roles and lead bigger teams from there. But it all started from this, by accident. And I should say by lots of, I can think of at least 3 or 4 names that have actually opened the door and given me a chance to progress before maybe even I'm ready or even you are as ready, right? So I think that's very important to mention as well. So yeah, that was a bit of a ramble, but hopefully that covers it nicely.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And do you know what is so interesting? During this podcast, all the recordings that we've done so far, we obviously, the whole concept of the podcast is to ask B2B marketers of different experiences, different levels, different time spent in the industry, the same sort of 5-7 questions. And when we ask that question, how did you get into B2B marketing? The amount of quite senior marketing professionals now who tripped and fell. They tripped and fell, or someone opened a door for them, or, the story of people's journeys into B2B marketing. They're not too different. Everyone's kind of not considered marketing as a profession, but their skill set lent towards it, or somebody identified along the way that actually this could be a really good position for you. And I think it's actually quite refreshing. If I was new and starting out in this industry, I would love to hear from senior marketers like yourself who say, it isn't something that I considered, but it's obviously worked and you've stuck with it and you've gained all this experience throughout your career. Bringing it then into the current day, what's one belief in B2B marketing that you've changed your mind on in the last 12 months?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question. I guess, and when I was thinking about this, it sort of relates to what I was saying about the NEC, sort of, because it is actually about events. So, in the early stage of my career, and even, I guess, today, to a degree, it's always baffled me why, when you're talking about budget and what to spend marketing budget on, if you mention an event, a big industry event, which is like 30K, 50K, or more, or whatever it might be, no problem at all. Signed off. We have to do it. It's an industry event. But when you talk about something more nuanced, like, podcasting or content strategy, or, let's really invest in a really great website and things like that. I think things have changed now. I think people, but I mean, if I talk over 10 years ago, I think at the time there's more sort of, do we really need to invest in social media and LinkedIn? And, do we, we've got these big, so, and so I guess with that in mind, I sort of got this attitude about events being, putting them all in one bucket, saying they're expensive. Do we get the return on investment? I could invest that in content strategy, which is scalable, better return on investment, and all this kind of thing. But I must admit, I think I was too sort of single-minded on this. I was probably having nightmares about the NEC and things like this, and some of the events I've done there, some of them just cost a lot but didn't really produce anything, if I'm being honest. But events are more than just that, right? it's obvious now, but you talked about B2B Marketing Live where we met. It's like more of a community. You're meeting people. You're not you're having these small sessions where you learn about things. And we did, it's about a year or 18 months ago, we did like an online event called the Digitalization Playbook, and we invited customers, prospects, opportunities. It was all done online, but we had different sessions. We had panel discussions, we had interactive sessions and things like this. And that's also an event, right? So I guess, I guess it's changed my perspective on events. I don't need to think about them as these big, sometimes soulless exhibitions. They probably do have a place, right? I mean, they probably do have a place, but I think, and that's another conversation, I think you have to have a different mindset around these big exhibitions. So it's not all about hundreds and thousands of leads or scans. It's the quality of conversation, which is much harder to then go back to a CFO and say, I've had great conversations, because they probably want more than that. But that's what I would say, is that events is more than just exhibitions and things like that. And you can get a really good return on investment. An in-person meeting is actually, it's hard to put a return on investment on paper, but the relationship you've built, and this, as well as me, but relationships you build and the rapport you build and things like that, you can't be beaten than being in person, whatever you try and do online. So yeah.
I completely agree. And I think it's almost been the value of more kind of micro events, I guess, is to summarize what you're saying, that in-person connection and focusing on smaller events that have more impact with the right people and in front of the right people. Do you think that has been supercharged by our need for connection post-pandemic, remote work, the shift to remote work and everything else? People are actually finding those micro events more valuable from a marketing and business perspective, but also from an attendee perspective than they were maybe 8-9 years ago when it was that footfall focus.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I could look at it a lot of different ways, but if we talk about the big exhibitions example, so a lot of them moved to like online virtual, during COVID, obviously when it wasn't possible, and maybe at that time they thought, we could save loads of money on hosting, booking out halls and doing all this kind of stuff. But then they realised quite quickly the experience. I don't know if you remember them, but they're like these virtual exhibitions. So you'd go around, and it's just not the same, right? It's completely not the same. You could still talk to someone and message someone, but and I can see why they did it, obviously during a very difficult time, but it just doesn't replicate that in-person feeling. I mean, I can only talk from my point of view, but I sort of appreciate both sides, because I love, being remote first and being able to work whenever, however, fit different things in and be flexible. But that doesn't mean I don't like going to the office, meeting people, doing workshops, and that kind. And I'm sure it's exactly the same for other people. We all crave some form of human connection, and I think we probably all got a bit sort of webinar. Well, I can't remember the phrase, but we got a bit sick of webinar. This kind of virtual events, which were very informative. But you're right, they don't replicate that in-person networking, connecting. Even just having a beer, right? There's things like that you can't replicate. So it doesn't surprise me that that's come back, because I think I don't know whether it's trying to think way back when. If there was like a presumption that forever we'd all just go, well, remote's way better, so we'll just never do in person again. But I don't. I went to, for example, was it about a month ago now, to a big podcast show in London, and that was amazing. You meet so many people, connect with so many people, and people I've met, online as well, and then in person, and it's just a completely different feeling to it. So that's all I can say about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And yes, I absolutely did attempt to partake in the virtual event version of exhibitions, and it was, hats off to them for turning it around and trying something different, but it was a bizarre experience. What shifts are you seeing then, Niall, in the B2B buyers and the B2B buyer journey through sort of recent times?
Yeah, I guess this is when we bring in the magical word of AI into the conversation, which probably is in every single conversation. I think that's just adding to to a theme that's been progressing over the past sort of 10 years. I mean, one of my big sort of heroes, and when we talk about earlier in my career who sort of inspired me in marketing, like Chris Walker, who's probably someone you've heard, or most people have heard of. But he was the one who sort of shifted my mindset on marketing completely away from this sort of MQL, SQL, I think hamster wheel, I think he used to call it. But it's just like common sense marketing, and that people do their own research. So I'm not sure. I think the AI is actually helping to shift it in that direction, where people do their own research. They don't need to be guided by vendors. They don't need a salesperson holding their hand. They'll contact Siemens or whoever whenever they're ready to buy. And I think AI has probably just accelerated that, because all the information's at your fingertips. And it's another reason, I don't want to keep bringing it back to events, but it's another reason why people don't go to events now to to browse all the various products, and or it shouldn't be seen like that. It really should be seen as a way to connect with people, have a conversation, keep the relationship warm, and hopefully, particularly I'm talking maybe more from an enterprise point of view, at Senseye sort of targets a bit more. So I'm not sure. Not sure it's a shift, but I think it's just continuing that realization that we as marketers or B2B organisations don't have very little control over a B2B buyer journey, and it's more and more in the hands of the people who are doing their research and that kind of thing. Well, there is things we can do, of course, which we could come on to, I guess.
Yeah, of course. And that's kind of the challenge for marketers now, isn't it? Is to analyse and make strategic bets on exactly what they can do to influence the buyer while they're conducting their own research. Because I completely agree with you, and all the stats are there. Gartner reports on the buyer's journey shifting 70%, 80% of their journeys conducted independently before they even raise their hands to your company. So I guess this leads us nicely onto our next question, which is, what is a strategic bet that you think more marketers need to make, or that you're making in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so if you've been listening carefully so far, this won't come as too much of a surprise, but it's in content, but content that's authentic, primarily. And what I mean by authentic, so I mean, many years ago, like I said, I used to copyright, I used to write blogs, I used to write white papers. I used, the written word was everything to me. But when I think back to those times, and the organisations I was working for, who we were trying to sell to, and I'm like a junior marketer writing blogs, trying to impress, a senior as like C-level or whatever. And it sounds a bit, I mean, it's not that I didn't do a good job at them, but you can see the disconnect, like trying to connect with people. There's a big sort of gap there. So what I mean by sort of strategic investment, and it's something I've talked about a lot recently. I mean, podcasting is the main vehicle for this, as far as I'm concerned, because you can capture sounds a bit of a strange word, but you can capture the expertise within your organisation. And that's what I realised quite soon. So the story at Senseye was, I started off as a marketing manager, got promoted to like a VP of marketing, completely shifted the strategy towards this sort of content-led approach, and focusing and less focus on how many MQLs and SQLs and all this kind of thing. And the whole thesis was, we've got so many extraordinarily clever people within Senseye, doctors of this and that. There's so many doctors and it's like, at the moment, and if I think back to earlier in my career when I was doing white papers and stuff, I mean, white papers have their place, again, like blogs have their place, but the problem is they get over sanitized, pass through 5, 10 people, depending on what your approval process is. So I don't feel the real expertise makes it through. Whereas on a podcast, talking like this, it's authentic. We're talking, they're saying it in their own words. It connects with people a lot more. So it's a really long-winded way of answering, but content strategy primarily, podcasting as a certainty, because the return on investment is off the scale. If no one listened to my podcast that I host, in a way, I'd still get return on investment through repurposing and reusing it, and many other things as well. So I think that's the starting point. But it starts with authenticity. People probably think scaling up content is use LLMs and off you go kind of thing. And of course, they have their place to improve the workflows and stuff around it. But the heart should always be the people within your organisation. Find the people who like to be on podcasts, who have the expertise, and find ways to package and share it with the world, and do that consistently at scale.
I absolutely love that. And it's one of the reasons that we've launched this podcast, right? We want to give the voice back to the B2B marketer. We want B2B marketers to have a place where they can come and communicate what they're doing and share those pain points and challenges. Because these questions that you're answering for us, Niall, are questions that we're asked or having conversations with marketers about every single day. And one of the questions that tends to these kind of questions tend to lead on to is a marketer saying to me, is anyone else experiencing this? And that's where the concept of this podcast came from. It was, hold on a minute, if I'm having all these conversations and our team are having all these conversations and every B2B marketer we talk to feels quite alone in the environment that they're working in or the situation, or, the changes and everything else, let's give a platform, let's provide them with a platform where they can actually hear from other experts in the space and their peers and hear that actually, things are changing over here and, they can relate to that. And like you said, bringing that inside of your business as well, especially a business like the company that you're working for, it's really hard to capture that expertise in a different way with authenticity. And it's really interesting when you say about the number of levels of approval on written content versus this sort of content. Because you're right, having worked agency side in the past, I worked in the electronics field, and we tried to produce product matter expert content and even down to a press release, for example. And that quote would go from something really, really strong, and then it would go down and down and down all through the chains of approval, all the levels of approval. And then by the end of it, it was a very standardized quote that had kind of lost that essence. You mentioned AI, and I trust that you're using AI inside of your business. I know you spoke on a panel about AI and it was really, really interesting. I want to ask you a question from a previous guest. So Leanne was a guest on B2B Marketers Off the Record, and she asked the future guest, which is you, how are you using AI to support with personalization?
Oh, with personalisation. So, I mean, not to, guess we're, I'm okay to mention sort of specific tools, but, within, a corporate environment like Siemens, what we're very lucky to have is things like, Microsoft Copilot 365. And the reason why I mention it is because, and I think it probably is not the coolest tool out there, everyone's having Claude and ChatGPT and all this kind of stuff, but, in an environment where, you imagine Siemens and all the different information in a SharePoint for a company of 300,000 people, and not to say I've access to all those documents, but the thing is, you can ask, if someone asks me a question or emails me something and wants some information, I can pull together all these different sources, all the different contexts. Because what I see the most powerful thing about AI is, or the way it is powerful, is the context you provide, and if you have the right context, which Siemens has all this backlog of I say backlog, but years and years and years, multiple decades of information available. Then you've got all the context you need to provide that personalised. You provide that personalised response if it's an email, personalised content if you're adapting something. Like I said, I mean, AI is a great way to repurpose, but it's not about generating something from nothing, which I guess you could do. Just ask it, create me a great blog post about X, or you could bring in, I've got this podcast here from this guy, this podcast here from here, this podcast here from here. How do I I was just thinking of an example where I've done that, recorded different episodes and said, how can I turn this into a mini series? And it sort of knows the context, then goes, this is the series title, should be done in this order. Maybe do a trailer as well with these quotes and stuff, and it's amazing. Right. Yeah. So, but the feed into it is the human expertise, and then my judgment ultimately to go, I like that idea. Or actually, that one's not so good. And again, I'll come on to that later about where investment should be made is sort of linked to that. But yeah, it's at the moment. I mean, the balance. If you can balance between the human and the AI, that's where you get the true value, not replacing anything. Yeah.
I completely agree. Humans at the start with the context and the information that's going in, so garbage in, garbage out, that classic AI phrase. But humans at the start, AI in the middle, and then humans at the end to analyze, critique, feedback, tweak, and assess what's coming through. That's a great example, actually. Both internal comms and personalization using internal comms. I mean, hadn't even considered how valuable a platform like Copilot will be for a business like Siemens that has vast amounts of information inside a SharePoint, multiple points of view, documentation, and everything else. You would be lost forever if you were trying to read through all of the resources that are available for you in that SharePoint. But using AI to pull it together and analyze it and then give you some responses is a great use case.
Yeah, I'm almost forgetting what it was like before. It's getting to that stage now where I was like, "What? I must have done this before somehow." But but the podcast, I joke about it, but the podcasting, and you said it'd been on a panel, and I described sort of how we've developed a workflow for scaling up both the recording, editing, distribution, repurposing, and everything. But that all started before AI. Right. So it sounds easy now. Oh, you got AI, so of course you can repurpose. But actually, a lot of it, the groundwork was already done before AI. I mean, it's been a thing for a long time. If people think AI was invented with LLMs, but yeah, what we call conversational AI, let's call it. Yeah. So we were very, very efficient even before AI. But of course, it's just made things so much simpler.
Yeah, of course. So you kind of alluded towards this, and I want to unpack it a little bit further. What type of investment do you think marketing leaders should protect, even when budgets are tightened?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So the only thing that springs to mind, and I know it's a hot topic in every industry at the moment, but I think it's actually people. So, because you read all these stories, how true some of them are, or how exaggerated some are. But where, and it's not just a marketing thing, but you hear about marketing leaders going, "I'm going to replace my whole team with agents, and that will save me lots of money." And everything I've talked about so far, authenticity, human input, for me counters that argument. But ultimately, you should invest in the two things: invest in the people you've got. It shouldn't be about replacing expertise with AI. You should be looking and go, God, and most teams are probably incredibly stretched already. So you're looking and going, oh God, how can I support them to be more efficient and work more and produce, more and better results for our business? That should be the first thought. And then on the other side, then it's investing in the right AI tools to help support that. And again, I emphasize support that, not replace, support them. I'm working, I don't have a percentage for it, but so much more efficiently. Certain tasks can just get done much, much simpler rather than spending lots of time thinking. So then I can focus on the things that AI can't replace at the moment, I guess, creativity or human judgment on things. There's certain things that an AI can't judge in the moment, with various different priorities. Even if you ask an AI for an opinion, you should still use your own judgment or trust your own judgment to do it. So it's basically, in summary, it's the people first. Invest in the people, help support them, invest in them, upskill them, and then bring in the tools, AI tools, various out there, but even just the ones we all know and love. Invest in those to help make them more efficient and help them focus in other areas that can support your business, would be what I'd say.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I love how you've put it. It reminds me of a talk that I heard the other day by a gentleman called Jeremy, who I think is head of communications at IBM. And he gave a really simple concept, which is don't think about it as AI, think about it as IA. So it's not artificial intelligence, it's an intelligent assistant. And using it in that way enables you to lean on your experience, lean on your expertise, and create space, like you've said, Niall, for the creative thoughts, the cognitive thinking, all of the things that we possess from years of work, learning, and the things that we actually really enjoy as well. Like if I can get AI to take some of the mundane tasks off of my to-do list so that I can focus on the more strategic aspects or the more creative aspects of my role, that's a win-win. It's when AI is taking over the creative side of it, writing the content for me and everything else, that I then find myself just doing more administration and more prompting and more, rather than actually the part that inspires me and the part that I agree with you. I think that's the area that the human touch should be. is in those more creative, inspiring, strategic thought pieces rather than, on the administration side of things.
Yeah, I mean, just think, do we want a future where our roles are just orchestrating agents to do everything, or do we want to, work together? So, who knows what the future will bring? I mean, things are developing so fast. It could be out of date in a week's time, what we're saying here. But, I still see no sign. I mean, there might be a certain industry, but I still don't see no immediate sign of AI wiping out lots of jobs. I mean, what's happening is it's making, it's helping to make people work more efficiently. So with that, they're like, well, we can do slightly more with less. So I don't think it's about, replacing, or maybe I'll just contradict myself. I don't know, but I'm a belief that the two can play together and benefit both, if used in the right way, of course.
Yeah, of course. What's one thing that you wish you could change about marketing?
And again, this is something I've been passionate about for many years, and a journey I had to go through at Senseye and that promotion. Not that the founders at the time weren't supportive, but again, it's this idea that marketing should be treated seriously, right, as a revenue generator, not a cost on a spreadsheet that, oh no, we have to do it, or another way to look at it is treated like a sales assistant, right? So you're there just to be subservient to sales needs, and I mean that's part of that. That's honestly part of the job. It should be. Even then, it should be a collaborative thing. It's not like we're just assistants waiting to do that. There's a lot more than marketing can do if they're given the trust and the buy-in from the very, very top, which I'm very fortunate to have had. They're big believers in marketing and the direction I wanted to take Senseye at the time, and in previous roles as well. But I think, first of all, you need to be lucky to find, like I said, that leadership team who actually believes in marketing. I remember when I used to interview a lot more often than I have done in recent times. When I used to interview, I always used to ask especially when I was speaking to like the CEO, or it'd be what do you think of marketing? What's your view on marketing? And if I wasn't satisfied with that response, how important is it to the growth of your business, kind of thing? And I think from that you can find out a lot. But again, long-winded answer, but it's really that marketing is treated seriously for what it can do, which is drive a huge amount of business and attention to an organisation when done correctly. And I think it's moving in the right direction, but I suspect it's still not fully there. There's still lots of crayons and colouring in department, all that stuff. There's probably still a lot of that going around, which I think is you're completely underestimating the profession.
I completely agree with you, and I think actually the shifts in the B2B buyers, certainly within the space that we work in, within the tech space, is almost helping support and champion the value of marketing, because the B2B buyer wants to research, they want to conduct their own, self-analysis of vendors, and they're doing their own research and they're not ready to talk to sales. So how do you get your brand in front of those people whilst they're researching? One of the ways is through marketing efforts, right? And I think it's helping prove the case for marketing, but I agree, there are far too many businesses still that look at marketing as the cost department, the colouring in department, and it's just simply not the case. There is so much more to marketing than just nice graphics and just nice stands. We're coming to the end of the recording of this podcast, and I would love to ask you, and it can be aspirational or someone who would you recommend to join us in B2B Marketers Off the Record?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I mean, LinkedIn. I mean, this one I'm so lucky now, because I think when I started, social media wasn't a big thing, and there's just so many fantastic people on LinkedIn, including yourself, actually. But lots of fantastic people sharing such valuable gold, and of course podcasts, as well. I mentioned Chris Walker as well, because he started very much in the podcasting realm. So Chris Walker would be, a dream one. He's not really doing a lot of B2B marketing now these days, I don't think, but he'd be an aspiration one. But if I get the chance to have two, there's a lady called Natalie Marcatulio, who works for Novatic. Novatic, I don't know if you've heard of it, but Novatic's like an interactive demo platform, so you can create or recreate your. And I was actually on their podcast as well, but she knows her stuff basically, and particularly in the category. I mean, it's emerging. It's probably more mainstream now, but I guess she's had to help build a completely new category, and it convinced me because it sort of proves about my view on marketing, because the reason we use Novatic at Siemens is because I've been following Natalie on social media and following them. There was no outbound to me. There was no event I went to. It was just simply great content. Right. So yeah, that's who I'd recommend. Really,
Amazing.
really knowledgeable. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I'll have to check Natalie out on LinkedIn, and hopefully she'll join us for a future recording. It could be Natalie, or it could be someone else. What one question would you like us to put to a future guest?
Yeah. So my question, I'm always one for learning, and particularly when you make a mistake, learning from the mistake. So I guess what I'd ask someone is, what's the biggest mistake you've made in your career, and then what did you take away from that to help you sort of move forward and improve in the future? Or, I mean, if you want a second part, so how would you reflect on that today, and how far you've come?
I think that's
more than one question. More than one question.
Well, more than one guest, more than one question.
Oh, there we go.
No, I'm joking. I think that's an awesome question. I can't wait to ask it. It's really insightful, and you're so right, Niall. We all make mistakes, and I think it's how you learn from them, right? And if we can hear other B2B marketers making mistakes along the way, what they took away from it, what they learned, hopefully we either won't make the same mistake as them because we'll take the learning and not the mistake, or we'll relate to the fact that we too have made a similar mistake and learned something similar or something different from it. Thank you so much for joining us on B2B Marketers Off the Record. Your insight has been really, really valuable. Where can people find you if they want to hear more from you?
Quite simply LinkedIn. So Niall, Niall, not mainly mispronounced, but Niall Sullivan on LinkedIn, an accidental marketer in the tagline or whatever you call it. So you'll be able to spot me quite easily, I think.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Niall.
No problem. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.